For more, let's go to Glasgow. Gavin Hall, lecturer in political science, international security at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Let me ask you the timing of this attack and what does it tell you? 3 Russian generals killed inside of a year.
It's 3 Russian generals inside of a year, all with reasonably similar modus operandi, car bombs, or in this case, or in General Kirill's case, a remotely detonated scooter device placed inside the scooter. But it's they're all broadly operating in the same way. And if you see the pictures of them, one from this morning with General Sarvarov, they're all fairly limited and controlled, which indicates that someone's concerned with potential collateral damage, i.e. they're trying to hit a specific target, which does seem to fit the narrative that this is a well-organised operation that's taken place to specifically target these individuals.
Ukraine's not claimed responsibility so far. Is it certain that it's Kyiv?
It's by no means certain that it's Kyiv, and indeed Ukraine doesn't claim responsibility for any actions taken out by its security services. In response to the General Kirillov detonation bombing last December, then a Ukrainian source informed the BBC and others that it was Ukraine that was responsible for that, and that's the only real sort of confirmation we actually have. But I wouldn't expect Ukraine to follow and to suddenly claim this particular incident as being part of their ongoing operations, which they clearly have.
Yeah, the Ukrainians, which are claiming responsibility for another attack on an oil refinery. Of course, it's not all going Ukraine's way, but with Russia putting Ukrainian forces on the defensive, not just in the east of the country, but also with fresh attacks in the northeast, in Sumy, and also in Kharkiv oblasts.
Yes, there's continuing pressure being put by Russia on various aspects of Ukraine's defences, but we are also in the midst of the sort of the winter lull in military campaigning because of the rain, snow, and the general deterioration of the ground over the winter months. It's very hard to actually move military equipment around and gain offensive effects. So whilst Russia is probably taking advantage of some short-term opportunities that have arisen, it's not necessarily that indicative of Ukraine's ability to defend itself. It's because they tend to focus more on training up and preparing and getting ready for the better weather in spring in terms of its military operations. But what these incidents do tend to rely on is this idea that Ukraine isn't doing particularly well, which is something that we know how truthful Russian generals have been in speaking to Vladimir Putin. How much accurate information is he getting, or are certain tactical failures being covered up to present a more rosy picture? And if General Sarvarov is one of these people that's been involved in painting these rosy pictures and things that enable Vladimir Putin to still claim he's got a case of the ability to win the conflict, then that dynamic could change and could alter, which can then subsequently have an impact on the potential peace negotiations coming up.
Well, it's certainly this Monday been business as usual for the Russian president. He was welcoming fellow former leaders of former Soviet states to the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg on the sidelines of an informal summit of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Is Vladimir Putin's image at all dented in the former Soviet space?
I don't think it's dented. If anything, it's probably been strengthened by his sort of hardline approach and playing up to the sort of traditional Russian strongman image, being prepared to take on the West and not be pushed around. These tend to be sort of popular caricatures that play well with the Russian people and the post-Soviet space as well there. But he also has to be careful because he has to be seen as being able to explore avenues for peace and not be continually the belligerent one. And the interesting development yesterday was that President Macron had announced his intention to have a phone call with President Putin before the end of the week, which has been well received in Russia, which is opening up again another avenue and potentially allowing the EU and the European countries to have some kind of input into the ongoing talks between Ukraine, the United States and Russia as to what the final sort of settlement and solution to the conflict can be.
Yeah, if you're a European nation, what do you think these days when you watch the negotiations effectively going on over their heads? This weekend it was in Miami, involving the Russians, and Donald Trump naming an envoy to Greenland, which is further saber-rattling towards NATO ally Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's broadly in line with sort of Trump's rhetoric, which is Europe, it needs to do more to secure its own security. He's been pretty consistent on that. Whether you like or agree with his way of going about it, it's what he thinks and what he's pushing for. But the European countries have been continually seeking to have some kind of role in the process and not be excluded, because after all, it is European security that's at stake there. But how that was ever going to be done and who was willing to sort of put their head above the parapet and take the lead in trying to reach some kind of agreement has taken a little bit of time to do. And I think it's positive that President Macron has sort of stepped forward and tried to sort of take leadership in this area.
Yeah, and it's a question of how much European nations push back against Russia. Let me ask you one last question here, Gavin Hall. There was, over the weekend, Swedish authorities boarding a Russian vessel. It had emitted a distress signal. It's one of these ghost ships under sanctions for carrying weapons. You know, how do European countries handle Russia and its ghost fleet?
With great difficulty. Essentially, it's tracking and monitoring in the same way they'll broadly the same way that they'll engage in, say, criminal gangs and activities, narcotics trafficking, human trafficking, these types of things. They operate via surveillance and pretty basically intelligence work, trying to work out what's actually on ships and things. So it's a tough problem, but it's good to see that progress is being made and
should they board more of them is my question.
There's no reason why they shouldn't. It might be seen as being a bit aggressive and potentially provocative because they will make some mistakes and get them wrong. But yeah, if you're happy with making the occasional mistake and can be diplomatic when those occur, then why not?
Gavin Hall, so many thanks for joining us from Glasgow.
Thank you.